Bodani Maweto, and welcome to the Black Girls Rising webinar, where we're all about climate education and advocacy. I am your host, Olam Fumanisa, aka Wiser, and I'm here with my co-host.
Hi everyone, my name is Emihle, and this webinar or today's webinar will explore how big global climate decisions made at conferences like COP and through agreements like the Paris Agreement affect us as the people on the ground, and how do those decisions affect our day-to-day activities?
Yeah. Many times people hear about climate negotiations and the news, but they don't understand what they mean, why they matter, and how they shape real life experiences such as access to food, water, jobs, and safety. So today's session is here to break all that down in a simple but practical way. And today's guest is here to help us to do the breaking down. This guest is a special person all the way from Zimbabwe. Yes, she is a Climate Zimbabwe coordinator and ambassador, and her name is Tafazo Kuroti. She is also a certified climate diplomat and a leading advocate for climate and gender equality. She champions the crucial role of women in shaping climate action at all levels. She is also the founder of the Emerald Climate Hub, which is aimed at mobilizing young people. Tafozo, we are so honored to have you here and welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, and I'm also honored to be part of this webinar.
We are so interested on what you have brought to us, on how you're going to educate us on your presentation today.
So, as I was introduced, my name is Tafatswa Kurotwi, and I am based in Zimbabwe. And just to break it down, I know a lot of people, a lot of young people specifically, are always afraid, or the terms COPs and the terms Paris Agreement. What is it all about? What happens in those rooms and who goes there? So basically, the Paris Agreement is a landmark international treaty on climate change, which was adopted by 196 parties at the UN Climate Change Conference in 2021, which was COP21 in Paris on the 12th of December in 2015, which then entered into force on November 4th, 2016. And its main goals or its central aim is to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change by setting long-term goals. And the reason why we're here is because our planet is getting warmer. It's getting faster than ever before. And this is not just about nice weather or how is it today. It's about changing the rainfall patterns, the rising seas, the extreme heat that affects us as people, that affects our food, our water, and our safety. And to fix a global problem, we need a global plan. And that is where the story all began about the Paris Agreement. And then what is COP? So COP, it stands for the Conference of Parties, and it is the annual meeting where every country on earth, which is the 198. So then it was 196. Now we have 198 parties which gather to discuss climate change. And think of it as a global residence or an association meeting where world leaders, scientists, activists, young people decide how to manage our shared home. And our shared home, we mean the earth itself. So in 2015, where I'd mentioned earlier, this was the whole breakdown of the Paris Agreement, where all leaders came together to sign this treaty. For the first time, rich countries and poor nations alike, they agreed to cut on pollution. So it was a legally binding international treaty, and the goal was to avoid the worst effects of climate change by eliminating global warming. So the main goal was on temperature, was on adaptation, and it was also on finance alignment. So on temperature was to hold the increase in the global average temperature to well below 2.6 degrees, which is 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial levels. And when you talk of adaptation was to increase the ability to adapt to the diverse impacts of climate change and to foster resilience and low greenhouse gas emissions development. And on finance, the finance alignment was to make financial flows coexist with the pathway towards low greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilient development. So these are the main goals in the Paris Agreement. So the magic number, which most people be seeing on flyers, on posters, is the 1.5 degrees, which is the central aim of the Paris Agreement. It is simple, but then the real critical issue here is to keep the global temperature rise below 2.2 degrees and preferably limit to 1.5 above pre-industrial levels. And this is because scientists warn that crossing that 1.5 can risk irreversible damage to ecosystems and also to human life. So this was agreed in the Paris Agreement in 2015. So how it works is that the agreement does not force a single plan on everyone, but instead each country brings its own contribution, which is called the NDCs, the National Determined Contribution. So there's the plan, the report, and the upgrade. So the plan is that every country sets its own targets to reduce emissions based on its capabilities. And the report is that each country must be transparent and to regularly report on their progress to the world. And the upgrade is that every 5 years, countries must come back with a tougher, more ambitious plan, which is then implemented in the NDCs, the national determined contributions. So this is how it works. Each country is supposed to submit or must prepare and communicate and maintain a national climate action plan, which is its NDCs. And these contributions are set by each country and they represent their intended efforts to also reduce national emissions and also to adapt to the impacts of climate change. And the ambition cycle is that countries are also expected to submit a new and also an updated one. As I mentioned earlier, that every 5 years they need to have an ambitious one from the previous one that they would have submitted. And this is also to comprehend an assessment of the global stock stake of the collective progress towards achieving the agreement, which is the long-term goals. And this is just a current path and on where the progress is. And we are making progress, but it is also not fast enough. And this chart, as you can see, shows where we are heading versus where we need to be in terms of reducing our emissions as countries, and also not only countries in terms of us only in Africa or the global south, but everyone who are in the treaty as well. When it comes to reality and the promises that have been made, this is why young people are coming together demanding for climate action. They are demanding for more ambitious NDCs per countries. They are demanding for climate finance. They are demanding for loss and damage finance. They're also demanding for adaptation for finance. I mean, we are demanding that as young people. So this is the reality and also the promises that were made during the Paris Agreement that we need to maintain the 1.5 degrees Celsius, but are countries committing to their efforts? Are countries committing to those promises that they've made? And why is it matters? It's because of our safety, of our health, of our food security as countries, that we need a stable climates, which means stable prices for basics, that is maize, vegetables, bread, etc. And when it comes to safety now, preventing these floods and storms, which might result to loss and damage. For example, in Zimbabwe, we have also experienced cyclones, which have also resulted in loss and damage, loss of lives, and loss of livelihoods. And when it comes to health, we need less pollution, which means cleaner air and also fewer respiratory diseases. So the more we emit, it also causes harm to the air that we breathe, hence harming our health and the quality of life that we live, and also transitioning to economic and social well-being as countries as well. So this is why we need to ensure that we protect our future, we prevent from these climate harms, and we also need to adapt and to mitigate the climate impacts we are facing as countries. So the primary goal of this Paris Agreement is to ensure that we keep that global temperature rise below the 2 degrees Celsius. It's a global agreement and it needs to be set. That decision needs to ensure that it's securing the actions needed to achieve this 1.5 degrees Celsius for mitigation and also for adaptation. So just continuing my presentation, we also realized that we have past COPs in the previous years where world leaders, activists, academia, private sector, young people would come together as well. We had the Dubai COP, which happened in 2023, and which was COP 28, and COP 29, which was in Azerbaijan. And this year we had the COP in Brazil. So there was a major milestone where the world agreed to transition away from fossil fuels for the first time in history. And a loss and damage fund was also operationalized to help vulnerable countries and vulnerable nations. But we are still fighting to ensure that the loss and damage fund reaches the people who need it or who have experienced the impacts of climate change. This was the roadmap from Dubai to today, COP30. And the meetings which have already done also focus on how to pay for this transition, which means finance and protecting major forests like the Amazon. So the pressure is on to turn promises into real world action. But however, if you see the final text in the COP30 agreement, there was nothing that mentioned fossil fuels, even though there was an agreement, but that word fossil fuels was not highlighted in COP30 final text. So still together, young people are still coming together, activists, leaders, to ensure that the fund or what was promised should be delivered. There is need for an ambition, real-world action to ensure that countries who are being impacted by climate change, by the climate effects, are able to mitigate and to adapt to these conditions. And the whole transitioning away from fossil fuels, which is the core demand of the Paris Agreement, also creates which also creates an ecosystem amongst countries as well. Even though we are still trying to battle to say in Brazil, there was more pressure to ensure that we protect our environment, we protect our forests, we protect our local people, we protect our human rights. Still, that ambition goal on transitioning away from fossil fuels was not in the text. And now, what is our role in the story? What is everyone's role? Because some people might think I don't have a role, but everyone does have a role. It speaks to us. It doesn't matter where you come from, who are you, what degree you've done in school, or what you're majoring. You have a role to play in the story. Everyone has a voice, and that voice is to be amplified. So vote and voice up. So we need to support leaders to prioritize climate action because your voice matters. Buy smart, choose energy efficient appliance, reduce waste, and also support green businesses. And also talk about it. Normalize the conversation. Share what you know with friends and family. So this starts with you. It's not about being in the room, but also ensuring that you speak about it. You also reduce your carbon footprint as an individual. As I'm speaking right now, if you are in the room, we are to tweet about this webinar. It goes a long way because you don't know who's seeing, you don't know who's watching. So the more you tweet, the more you talk about it, the more it reaches a wider audience. So it also starts with me by supporting our leaders to prioritize more on climate action. We need to put pressure on them because because our voice matters. And we also need to ensure that we reduce our carbon footprint as individuals, because it also starts with us. Let's talk about it in schools, with friends, on the internet, on social media. Are you tweeting about it? Are you liking about it? Are you liking someone's post about environmental and climate action with friends and family? That is your role. It doesn't matter if you have a degree or you did climate finance or climate education. Everyone has a role to play, because all these issues, they cross cut. We talk of gender, we talk of people with disabilities, we talk of inequality. Everyone is affected, and everyone is in the story, and everyone has a role to take part in this initiative. What I can say is a greener future is possible. The Paris Agreement is just our roadmap, and COP is where we check the map, but we are the drivers. We are the drivers to ensure that there is climate action. We're the drivers to ensure that these policies are implemented in our countries. We're the drivers to ensure that we put pressure on our world leaders, on our governments, to ensure that they take climate action and they consider, especially young people, women, and people living with disabilities. Thank you very much for listening. This was my presentation on the Paris Agreement and COPs. Thank you very much. Any questions?
First, thank you. Thank you very much. And I actually love how you ended your presentation with the statement that we are the drivers. We have the voice to actually take part in the decision-making processes and actually fight for what is right. So that is very powerful. Now, do you have a question?
I mean, we could first give the floor to the people that are listening. And if you have any question for Tafatswa, then please proceed to, or please type it in the chat. But so long, I will ask this question, and it's been a question that I've been asking myself a lot these days with the G20 happening and COP happening. So my question would be, what does the just transition look like? Like when we're transitioning from the unsustainable methods that we've been using to sustainable methods that are now good for the environment. Are we still gonna, like, my question is, are we still using those to get to where we're going? And is the progress when we do that? Let's say maybe we use coal to generate electricity and we're moving to solar panels. Are we going to use the coal that generates electricity to make those solar panels?
Thank you very much for the question. So basically what you're trying to ask is, why are we transitioning and what is just transition, right?
Yeah.
So transitioning is that we want it to be fair and equitable for everyone. Because now we cannot say we are doing away with coal. We are just transitioning into renewable energy sources. We need to reduce the amount of emissions that we were doing or implementing using coal and oil and gas to a renewable energy source. But the argument comes in where the global south and the global north comes in, that we cannot transition when we don't have climate finance to ensure that we give our people renewable energy, we give them solar energy, we give them wind energy, because there's need that financing for us to be able to provide those kind of clean energy. So we cannot just transition without the climate finance. We cannot just say we have put down or we're doing away with coal and oil. But we need those resources to ensure that there's now clean energy in our countries. Because if we do away with coal and gas and then we sit, then what's next? People still will not be having that energy as well, that electricity. But now when we're saying we're transitioning, for example, Zimbabwe has cut all its dirty energy by 40%. That is our goal for 2030, 40%. So we're transitioning now into renewable energy. We're not just saying we've left coal and gas. We're now doing renewable energy, because mind you, we need those resources. We need that climate finance for us to be able to mitigate and also for us to transition into renewable energy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So my question will be, so how are the decisions that are taken in the Paris Agreement or at the COP transparent to us? Like, how are the decisions taken by our governments transparent to us?
This is where each country has to have those indices. So our indices guide us as countries and they have to implement. So each country has their national determined contributions to say as Zimbabwe or South Africa will be reducing our emissions by 40%, which means we need to see South Africa and Zimbabwe putting that into action, not just on the wording. So these policies now need to go back to communities and to implement them, because at the end of the day, we as the community are the ones who are being affected by what? By climate change. So our government are also guided by their indices, but also by the Paris Agreement as a whole.
So, with this year's COP, I did see a lot of things that conspired on the internet. Would you like to go in depth and just explain what was going on in terms of the Amazon and everything that conspired there?
Unfortunately, I was not in COP this year. I did not manage to attend due to personal reasons, but I've been following up on how the negotiations have been done. I think one of the wins was the Gender Action Plan, which was also implemented in Brazil, and also the issues of protecting the Amazon and the issues to do with deforestation and but the issues of the Paris Agreement of phasing out the fossil fuels, the text was not there in the final text. I've seen also how young people were coming together demanding for climate action, demanding for the finance, the loss and damage finance, and also the adaptation finance. That is what I've been following up through the journey. However, even though I wasn't there in person, I'm hoping in Turkey who have more ambition targets and more agreements that are taken into action as well, because you see as COPs happen, it's more like they go and discuss and treaties are passed and agreements are made, but the real action, the real implementation is what is done in our communities. This is the real COP that happens on the ground.
So, can you please explain to me, because I don't understand what adaptation finance means or mitigation finance? Can you just break it down for me in a way that everyone and anyone can understand?
So adaptation finance, this is the means that we need to ensure that we adapt to the conditions that have already done. For example, we need to adapt to loss and damage, but whereas we cannot adapt to loss and damage, right? And then mitigation funding, this is what needs to finances that needs to be put so that we don't reach to the loss and damages. You get, we need to mitigate it before it happens. We need to mitigate the droughts before they happen in our country. But then adaptation, this is where we are saying we need to adapt to the already existing
Something
conditions that are happening right now. Yeah, in a nutshell, for you to understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is where we are saying we need the adaptation fund, we need the mitigation fund, we need to ensure that we mitigate the impacts, and we also need to adapt to the impacts.
So, another question that I would actually love to ask you is that the Paris Agreement was adopted in 2015, right? So it's been like close to like 10 years now since it was adopted, and its main aim was to actually decrease global temperatures by to reach 1.5 degrees Celsius. So, but still it has not reached that 1.5 degrees, but yet it's been like close to like a decade now. What do you think is the main reason of these countries still not meeting that aim? Could it be like human activities or businesses not using eco-friendly practices in production? Or could it just be our governments prioritizing profit over people? Or actually
I think
mismanaging
I think
funds?
you have said it all. You have said it all. Profits over people, and this is where young people were fighting that we need more climate action and not promises, and we need to put the people first and not profits. This is where we need to ensure that we fight the private sector, because the private sector is the biggest polluter. We also need to fight the the rich countries, the global north countries, and for them to also pay back for the emissions that they're emitting. Because if you see the global south contributes less of the emission, which is about 4%, and 96 is the global north. So this is where we need to come up as young people to put more pressure on them to say we need more climate action, more ambition on climate action.
Yeah, thank you. So, do you think the Paris Agreement and the COP are actually effective in mitigating climate change?
I think we are getting there. It's a slow progress, but I think we are getting there as the parties, they're getting there. I know it's not a one day winning thing. I believe it's a process, and there's need for collaborative efforts amongst countries to ensure that we stick to what we agreed on. So I think it's a process, and we are getting there day by day. Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. Do you have another question?
So, as young Black girls, what would you advise us as people that are still new in the climate activism space and we don't know much about what is going on? Yes, we are trying to educate ourselves, but what more can we do besides searching and just trying to understand the situation that is happening or the crisis that is happening?
So my advice would be, yes, you can advocate, but there's need for meaningful engagement as young people. Let's not end on advocacy. Let's not end on protesting, but let's acquire the skills and the knowledge for us to be able to be in the rooms where the decisions are being made so that we can also contribute to those decisions as young people.
Yeah. So, another question that I have for you is that how can young people take part in decision-making processes, and how can young organizations or youth-led organizations like you for yourself, you are the founder of Emerald Climate Hub, right? So how can organizations like yours be funded? Like, how can government support those young people?
Yes, that's a very good question. And it's a matter of us also as young people to knock on their doors, because they won't come to us. We are the ones to go to them, because this is what we want and we want to make a difference. So there's need for us to acquire the skills and knowledge, get your certification. If you check out on the UNFCCC platform, there are free courses to do that you can acquire. If you look at the UNITAP website also, there are also free courses to do. We have acquired the skill, you have acquired knowledge. Now speak to your government. For example, the She Changes Climate, we were doing climate diplomacy training where we engaged other UNFCCC qualified negotiators to train other young people. So on the internet, are you searching for the right things? Are you searching for the right information? Because the information is there, but are we searching for the right information that we want? So firstly is to acquire that skill as a young person, and to acquire professional guidance for you to be able to be in the room, to be a certified, qualified young person, because the rooms are not limited. They are limited for you to be. It doesn't matter what age, as long as you are contributing meaningfully in those engagements. So I don't want young people to remain in the background, to be the ones who are protesting and shouting. And it's good. It gives pressures to world leaders. But also what's better is you being in the room and writing that text, and to say I was part of that team who negotiated on behalf of my country or on behalf of the Africa group of negotiators.
Wow. I also love the fact that you said before we take action or before we do anything, we first need to empower, we first need to educate ourselves, of which in this space of advocacy or activism, education is very important. We can't make decisions, we can't take action without knowledge. So that is very powerful. Thank you. So before any further questions, I would actually love to tell the people that have joined you there, you can actually ask questions. You can type them in the chat box. You are not the only ones talking. You can actually ask questions. Yeah. Yeah. And another question that I have is that let's talk about women and actually advocating for climate change, women in the climate space. There's a lot of inequality when it comes to women having power, women having resources, or women actually getting funding. So how does the Paris Agreement or how does the COP actually accommodate women-led initiatives?
At COPs, there are different thematics or different topics that are negotiated. So there's the gender, which is also negotiated.
Okay.
There's climate finance, there's technology transfer, etc. So on the gender, we're ensuring that when they are speaking of mitigation and adaptation fund and loss and damage fund, they need to prioritize a gender climate finance specifically for those for young people and women and also people with disabilities, for them to also be able to adapt to those conditions. So this is where the gender aspect comes in, that specific topics. So different topics are negotiated at COPs, and you need to make sure that you also focus on what you think is best or what you're qualified for or what you're interested in. But there is a gender topic that is negotiated. And also the gender action plan, I haven't read it yet, but it was also surpassed or passed at COP30 in Brazil. And if you look at Bonn, where all the technical meetings were done, each country were required to submit their own gender action plan. So this is where countries need to ensure that they also set their own gender-centered issues in that gender action plan to say this is what we want as a country, etc., to be negotiated in Bonn and also to be implemented at COPs. So the technical negotiations happen in Bonn every single year in Germany. And this is where countries were also required to submit their own gender action plan. So this is where women, or not only women, even our supporters are also coming together to ensure that there need to be a gender responsive plan and a gender responsive finance to ensure that we accommodate those that are on the forefront of the climate crisis, which are women, young girls, and also people with disabilities.
Yeah, that's actually nice. I actually love the way that it actually does caters for women and young girls in the climate space. Do you also have another question? No. So I wanted you to actually speak. We want to speak about you now. Your organization, the Emerald Climate Hub. Can you please tell us about it more? How do you mobilize young people? How did you actually start it? How was it hard? What if there was someone young like us that wanted to start an organization? What can you say to that person?
So the reason why we started the Emerald Climate Hub was we wanted to bridge the gap between young people who are in rural communities and young people who are not, and young people who are not able to even be in conferences on a local level, the regional level, what more at an international level. This is where we bring in, it's a diverse organization where we are bringing in young people from across Zimbabwe and also across the globe to ensure that we share ideas. We also find solutions to the climate crisis we are facing, and also integrating technology and information in our solutions, because we've already identified the problem, but we are the ones to bring about the solutions to the problem that we're facing. And it's a matter of starting now and not waiting for you to have the right things or the right tools or the right resources or the right knowledge. It's about you starting, and starting is looking around yourself, who's around you, who's your community, and also joining and also learning from other organizations who have already done it. That would be also my advice to young people, that it only takes more than two people to form a community or to form a group of young people who are bringing change. Because what's happening in Malawi or what's happening in Brazil and Zimbabwe, it's climate change, but we're being affected differently, and everyone is about to bring a solution to the problems that they're facing, as a community or individually, or as a country, and as a region.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Any last words?
My last words would be don't forget to engage with us at Emerald Climate Hub to give you what we are doing, what we've been working for. And please do join us. Also follow me at Tafaz Kwakuroti on all platforms. And I'm really glad that Black Girls Rising thought of me. And
Yeah.
I'm really honored. Thanks to you guys. And you are doing a good job as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tafato, for joining us today. And for everyone that is here, thank you guys for joining. And please don't forget to follow us at Black Girls Rising on Instagram, Facebook, and Spotify, including YouTube. Thank you so much.
And also don't forget to follow Tafaz Okuroti on IG and also follow what they are doing at Emerald Climate Hub. And remember what Tafaz said. The Paris Agreement is just a roadmap, and the COP is just where we're checking where the map is, and we are the drivers. So don't forget to stay wiser, stay until next time. Thank you.